Okay, let me just test this out. Okay, perfect. Hello everyone, good morning. I am Tereza. I contribute to various projects. I will set fun in the comments, Crypto Altruist and ReFi Medellin. And I feel super honored to be here today and be kicking off ETH Prague and be maybe setting the foundations for some of the conversations that we are going to be having within the Sustainable Futures track of the conference within the next few days. And I know that ETH Prague actually has a history of supporting some of these and stewarding some of these Solarpunk discussions. And I think it's really exciting because it is like a little opportunity for us to dive deep into world building and imagining what a future that we want to build, what it looks like. So I want to focus on that today and maybe zoom in a little bit into what it takes to get more people excited about this vision. So what I'll do is that I'll spend the next 20 minutes basically arguing that it's not that technology is not important, but rather that there is no tech scaling and adoption without culture and stories. So just quickly, let's do a little recap for what Solarpunk is, just to know what we'll be talking about. So Solarpunk is basically a literary, artistic, societal movement that believes that there is a positive future out there that is like laying at the intersection of technology, nature, and community. So these are the three pillars of Solarpunk. Obviously, solar refers to renewables, to an optimistic vision, and punk is kind of a hint at this counterculture, this DIY culture, this kind of opposition to the status quo. Solarpunk was first mentioned in 2008 in a blog post titled "From Steampunk to Solarpunk" by Mrs. Sturge. And it basically was this idea that we don't have to accept only dystopian visions of the future like cyberpunk, but can have an alternative that's more optimistic. And then you can see that it was actually around the same time that the ideas for Bitcoin were laid out as well. And it got more traction around 2014, where there were more posts. That's also where a lot of the kind of like Tumblr aesthetic got established. There were more posts like one by Adam Flynn called Notes Towards a Solarpunk Manifesto. So that's kind of how it got set. Since then, it's been like present more or less as a niche kind of movement. I think in the Web3 world, it actually hasn't really established itself properly yet. But I think that it has a big correlation with something that which is regenerative finance, also known as ReFi. And I think that ReFi really is kind of the Solarpunk workshop in the Web3 world. And it has a lot of correlation when it comes to things like community currencies, things like land stewardship, regeneration, kind of creating different models of capitals that are less extractive and all that. And I've been in the ReFi space for over 3 years now. I think it's about over 4 years old. And there have been a lot of interesting experiments, also a lot of interesting challenges. And I think it's interesting to draw from that as kind of some practical backing. So that's kind of the relation between those two. I think what's interesting, obviously, about both of those is that they have the same they face the same criticism, which is that they're trying to draw this big vision, right, of what the future should look like. And you must have seen like a lot of these kind of visuals on Twitter or everywhere. It's like, again, like green, but like, what does it really say about like tangible actions towards real world change? So that's the biggest challenge that it faces. And one phrase that I've seen a lot when it comes to like Solarpunk Reddit discussions and all that is that the only reason we don't live in a Solarpunk world is because no one has bothered to make it yet. And obviously that quote kind of hints at our own agency in like changing the world and us coordinating to do that. But I think that it's obviously like more difficult than that, and it requires a lot of different building blocks. And I think that Solarpunk actually lacks in a lot of these. So for example, there is having the clear destination. Again, there's a lot of the visual aesthetic kind of backing, but there's no like consensus on what is actually Solarpunk and what isn't. And when we talk about something like, I don't know, DeFi, for example, we probably don't have to sit here and like figure out together what DeFi is again. But when you go to different spaces where people talk about these topics, it's quite common that even after years of this being a thing, they're still like, okay, let's stop and discuss what is actually ReFi. What are we trying to do? So there's not really like a consensus on what these things are, and it really harms the kind of building of different primitives on top of that. Then there's the narrative scaffolding, which is related to it. It's kind of like the passion, the memes, the concepts, the culture, all around that. Like Solarpunk has, again, a lot of visuals, but not as many stories. Then there's the composable stack. And again, in DeFi, we have like wallets and token standards and developer tooling. Or like in DAOs, right? We have, if you want to start a DAO, you can just use Charmverse and Coordinate and Snapshot and all these tools, but in regenerative finance and Solarpunk, a lot of these tools, if they get built, they often get lost. And then there's shared memory, which I think is actually like the other part of the stack, very related to that. Like if you have the tools building the technological stack, then shared memory is like the knowledge stack, right? What are some of the mistakes that we shouldn't repeat? It's like when you go to hackathons years after years and you see another person building, I don't know, a tokenized carbon marketplace, right? And there's no kind of library of what has been done in the past and how it can be improved. Then there's the economic engine, and I think that's a really important one, because if you're trying to sell someone on this big vision of future, with different models, like, again, community gardens and community currencies and barter systems, you need to show them that it works. And I think that Solarpunk and regenerative finance need to do more work in codifying these and really building a strong argument for these new economic systems. And then urgency signal, which is really the call to action, right? Like, why would anyone want to get involved with this? Who are the enemies in Solarpunk? What happens if the Solarpunk world doesn't get built? So yeah, there's a lot that needs to be constructed. And maybe to show that a little bit, if you've ever had to write anything, or if you, I don't know, create content, you probably know this curve. It's the story arc. And usually have the hero kind of following that path through, setting the context. Then there's some kind of tension towards escalation and resolution. And when you think about things like Bitcoin, there is a lot of stories that could apply to this. Like even the founding myth, right, with like Satoshi Nakamoto kind of being in the midst of the financial crisis in 2008, kind of building that maybe lack of trust towards institutions, and then kind of leading to the Bitcoin white paper. So the question is, what are these in the Solarpunk space? What are these in the regenerative finance space? Like, if you've ever built something with, positive impact, what was your motivation for it? Like, why didn't you choose to continue it, or what happened that it failed? I think these things really need to become clear, because if I tell you, like, okay, do you want a greener world? You will probably say yes. If I ask you, do you want a community-driven world? You will probably say yes. Like, I don't know who you would have to be to really disagree with the Solarpunk vision per se. But if I ask you, are you a Solarpunk? It's, I bet less people are going to say yes, right? So there needs to be that kind of narrative story. There needs to be that passion, that tension. We need to have that clarity. And to make that even clearer, I want to just go quickly into the Ethereum mythology, which is the story that I think most of you have heard about, Vitalik forming some of his views around decentralization, which really came from something simple that allows us to kind of relate. And I don't know if a lot of you played World of Warcraft, but the idea was that he was playing World of Warcraft, has his warlock character, feeling really good, empowered in the game, until a patch comes 3.10 from Blizzard, who says, okay, we are going to nerf this spell that you have, the Siphon Life spell. And from there, you realize, okay, anyone can come at any moment and completely change the rules of the game, right? And I don't like that. And then, probably that leads to, okay, I'm going to quit the game and, going to develop these ideas a little more, because I don't believe that anyone should have control over anything that I do. So I think having stories like that people can relate to, when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to sharing, is extremely important. And just to highlight a little more, even if you don't believe in this, it's actually anecdotally said that stories are up to 22 times stickier than facts. So it really helps ground you in the real world. And the question really is for Solarpunk then, what's the cultural logic that makes it worth adopting? And it comes again to answering these questions like, who are the heroes? What do the cities exactly look like? How do these people spend their every day? What do they try to solve on the community level? What are some of the lenses or values that they have? And that's really something that hasn't been done collectively that much yet. But at the same time, stories are also a system for like memory and strategy. So it's not necessarily that there are not people doing these things. Like I know a lot of people, like doing great work in the Amazons, working with indigenous communities. I know people building great dashboards for biodiversity data and marketplaces. But even then, you realize that these stories are not told as often. It's really difficult to dig them up, and I spend probably like tens of hours every week on Twitter, and still I struggle to find them. So first is like creating these stories in the first place, but second is also creating like a whole infrastructure for it. And that's really what I want to argue for here, that like we need a whole culture and information infrastructure and scaffolding, whether that's in Solarpunk or outside, because otherwise, everything gets lost, there is nothing to build upon, and you're kind of always stuck in the same conversations and cycles. So we need better practices to create, to share, to capture stories, and that's kind of what I want to propose here today, even though it's something we need to do together. So, oops, here we are. So I just wanted to conceptualize this in like a little simple Solarpunk stack or Solar stack. So I think we need to really start with 3 main layers. First is a story layer where we create an emotional pool. That's where the memes come in, that's the stories, the case studies, the pilot, and all that. Then we have the tooling layer, which is really building the composable stack that others can build upon. And it can be tech tools, but it can also be different frameworks and standards. And then there's the coordination layer where these two really like come together. That's where we share practices, that's where we exchange, that's where we kind of, again, like ground ourselves in our world. And there is a lot of cool projects that are already kind of contributing to these layers. And this is something that all of us can actually contribute to in some way. So let's look deeper into each. First, there is the story layer. Again, that's where we do a lot of the sense making together. That's where we establish the urgency. That's how we turn Solarpunk or any idea from the regenerative finance space, for example, from utopian vision to a playbook. So this is why recording your work, working on case studies, pilots is so important. A really good example that I like is from Regen Network. I just included like a screenshot of what their app looks like. They launched this project called Jaguar Credits, which is an initiative in the Amazons, and they have partnered with Pachama, which is an NGO that's been around probably for like a decade, a Brazilian credits body, and like local indigenous groups. And they have launched these credits. And when you go to their website, you can see how many credits were sold, what's the price, you can buy them as well. And there is different case studies and materials written on this from different like POVs of the different actors involved. So it's really interesting. Another one that I know is Mercy Corp Ventures, which does great work implementing stablecoins in different communities in Africa. And there's also one which I would recommend checking out by Plastics, which is basically like a protocol that tokenizes plastic recovery certificates. And they have partnered with FC Barcelona and launched these like beautiful NFT collections that they can then sell to their fans. And it was just like a really good collaboration. But what I noticed about all these like 3 different case studies is that they are all driven by institutional collaborations, right? But I don't think we have to wait until we partner with like a big institution to be proper around the way we capture our knowledge and stories and document. So I think my invitation here is just like for us to think about how do we capture knowledge, how do we make it accessible, and how do we make sure that it helps and contributes to build capacity in this space. The second layer is the tooling layer. The tooling layer, again, is a really hard one because the idea is that you build something that someone else can use and it solves a real problem, right? And I think in the ReFi space, more than anything else, you will see that there's always like a new shiny framework that someone wants to promote, and they get like people excited about it. And it's really cool because even if you believe in these frameworks. You're like, okay, this is something that would really help my community, and I want to implement it. But then you realize, oh, it's actually not that easy. And I think a good example is hypercerts. I don't know if everyone's heard about hypercerts, but basically it's like semi-fungible impact certificates. And I do love the idea of having like impact like baked into a token and being able to trade it and create marketplaces for it and all that. And we had a call with the ReFi DAO, with the local communities, and we're like, okay, this would be great to implement, because it's great for like impact measurement, also transparency. It's creating a new incentive for impact. So we said, okay, let's try it, right? And then we went to our community, and they didn't see the value of implementing that, right? Because it's just more steps, more work, and unless you really ground it in like real-world success, people will not understand why they should use it, or there's not enough incentive, right? So figuring out tooling and like making it composable is really challenging because it needs to be something that really makes a difference and is easy to use enough. I think a project that has done great work, obviously, is Gitcoin, because they have built a lot of the capital allocation primitives and contributed a lot to the public goods funding space and funded a lot of the regen and Solarpunk projects for sure. And what is interesting about them is that they really like took different mechanisms like the quadratic funding primitive and build it up and build different tools for it as well, just like Sybil detection and Grant Explorer and the Gitcoin passport and all that. So they have really created a whole grant stack, and now you can even like build on that and use that through things like Ala protocol. So I think that's a great example, but not everyone has the I would say like size and capacity of Gitcoin. So other really cool examples of something you can do doesn't necessarily have to be the best like tech stack tool that we can think of. But there's, for example, Traditional Dream Factory, which is an eco-village in Portugal that also does great work capturing some of the knowledge. And they actually have really cool governance, on-chain governance mechanisms that I think if anyone wanted to start, another eco-village could learn from. And then another one is Edge City, which is a pop-up community, that started kind of after the wave of the first like Zuzalu communities. And it's also trying to create a stack of how we can better build pop-up communities and coordinate around space. And one that I want to also give a shout out to is the Design School for Regenerating the Earth, which is led by Joe Brewer, doing fantastic regeneration work in Colombia. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like technical tools in the traditional sense, but also how do we kind of like codify knowledge that we can replicate and use so that it doesn't get lost. And finally, there's the coordination layer, which is really about not being, an island and being part of your community, because at the end of the day, that's kind of how we move the space forward. And I realized that a lot when I was leading now the season 4 of the ReFi podcast, and we did like 15 episodes. And I realized like through the conversations that I was having with some of our like listeners later, that it doesn't really matter if we actually manage to get like the next big project on the podcast. What is more important is that we are creating like this little structure of knowledge and interaction, because we kind of realize that, okay, somebody listens to this episode and then they're like, okay, I want to work with them. Okay, then they connect to the speaker, then they try something together. Maybe it fails. Then somebody else picks it up, in a few years or something. But it's really about kind of creating the pathways and always kind of putting more richness into the knowledge network somehow. So I actually split the actions into 2. One is more like participate, and the other one is steward. And I would say especially the stewarding of knowledge and all that doesn't always seem like the sexy work, right? No one wants to be updating documentation and working on a case study, but it really does pay off to invest in this. And maybe just as an example, I think maybe the Ethereum localism movement is worth mentioning because it's now picking up a lot of speed. And I actually really appreciate that it's a movement that's kind of trying to create a repository for some of this work and what you can do locally with your community. So if you want to check them out, it's ethereumlocalism.xyz. And I am really excited about that because when you go there, you can, in one place see things like, okay, what is, I don't know, maybe Solarpunk, what is this, what is like Ostrom principles and all that. So you don't have to have those conversations again and, like dig for those resources. So this is much appreciated. Okay, and just to wrap up maybe, I was kind of looking at the things that it takes for a movement to stick and thrive. And this is some of the things that I find, and you'll see that they really are related to culture and stories a lot. So whether that's like Solarpunk or anything else, we need to invest in infrastructure for knowledge and culture. And what it made me think about is that whether it's like a translation, whether it's someone building an integration, whether it's someone hosting a hackathon on these topics, all these things really contribute to it. And it is totally doable to push this movement or push whatever it is, like whether that's regenerative finance or blockchain for good, or if you just want to advance your ideals and the things that you believe in. It is doable if you are more strategic about the ways you capture knowledge, the things that you build, the communities that you are part of, and it really makes all the difference. So this is my invitation to share, build, and cultivate stories. Thank you very much.